Now we're going to draft a butterfly sleeve. We don't need a simple short sleeve pattern for this. We are going to measure our dress's armholes for our calculations. In the file section or in the description, you will find a PDF to download that gives you all the measurements you need for this. So yeah, don't stress about that. I'm going to show you how to apply them now. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do, there is a bit of maths involved with drafting this sleeve. You're going to measure your front and back armholes. So just measuring that front armhole. That's 9 3/4. I am going to subtract 1 inch from this 9 3/4. The 1 inch is my seam allowance at the top of the armhole and the bottom. So it's only going to be 8 3/4. I'm just going to write that down. Front 8 3/4 of an inch. Okay, that's the front, and then the back. It's also 9 3/4, and I'm also going to subtract that 1 inch from there, so my back is also 8 3/4. Okay, and now I'm going to add these two, and that will give me 17.5 inches. And then I'm going to subtract 1 inch from this again, and that is my stretch allowance, because you are going to cut a circle. You'll see that in a moment. There is going to be a bit of stretch involved, so we're just going to work on 16.5 inches. Okay, now we want to establish the radius of this armhole circle. So I'm going to take my 16.5 inches. Sorry, I just want to write radius there. And I want to divide this by 6.28. That gives me 2.64, but I would rather just want to round that off. So I'm just going to say 2.75 inches. That's 2 3/4 of an inch. So that is my radius for the armhole circle. Now the next thing I want to establish is the length of my sleeve. My chosen length is going to be 9 inches. I think that's a nice length. But now I need to add seam allowance for where the sleeve will be stitched to the armhole, and then obviously also the hem allowance at the bottom. So that gives me a total of 1 inch. So I'm adding 1 inch to that. That's half an inch for the top of the sleeve and half an inch for the hem. So that's my length is going to be 10 inches. Okay, so now I've got all my calculations and I am ready to start drafting to start drawing the circle that's also going to serve as the outline of my butterfly sleeve. I need to get a piece of paper that's big enough. We established that the length of my sleeve is going to be 9 inches, and I added an inch to that for seam allowances on both sides, so that gives me 10 inches. So I'm going to make a mark on my paper. That's the center of my circle, and I'm measuring 10 inches all around. All right, there, just move this up a bit. There is my circle. This is the outline of my sleeve. So the next thing I want to do is draw in my armhole. Now we already calculated that radius as well. Let me just check my measurements again, and I see that my radius was 2 3/4. So what I'm going to do now is from my center mark, I'm measuring, let's just do that in the middle. So that's my middle mark there. So that is my new center, or not my new center, but this is the center of my armhole, and the radius is 2 3/4. So I am going all around again. So this is my armhole, and over here, just want to make sure this is in a straight line. I'm going to notch over there. This is my underarm seam notch, and I'm going to notch over here. Sorry, I made that one to the wrong side. And this is my shoulder notch. So this is going to be the top of my sleeve, and like we established, it's 10 inches. When the seam allowance comes off, this is going to be 9 inches. So all I need to do now is cut out my sleeve. I cut out my sleeve and my armhole, and I just wrote that this is my underarm seam and this is my shoulder seam, and obviously my butterfly sleeve.